Hey everyone, Brandon here. There are certain Pokemon out there that have some kind of gimmick to them, whether that be in their design, like the Voltorb and Fungus lines acting as Pokeball mimics, their type, like Kecleon or Galarian Stunfisk's type-changing abilities, or even the most famous example, Eevee, with its multiple split evolutions. So naturally, in my own Pokemon region based on India and the surrounding area, Devar, I had to make some of my own. After getting through essentially the tutorial section of the game, the Devar region would become open to you, and you would be introduced to our first Gimmickmon of the video. The first kind of gimmick I wanted to approach was a very recent one, the collecting gimmick, which we recently got with the Pokemon Gimmighoul, having to begrudgingly collect 1,000 Gimmighoul coins in order to evolve this dude into a freaking string cheese mascot. So in Devar, I wanted to have something similar but to take all the tedium out of it. So let me introduce you to Muscella, the merchant Pokemon, a pure normal type. As you may well know, India is known as a major hub in the world of herbs and spices, with it having a major hand in the spice trade throughout Asia, North Africa, and Europe in antiquity, bringing the world spices like cardamom, coriander, cinnamon, cumin, other spices that start with C. Muscella naturally acts as a reference to that, carrying around its little backpack-like rack of different spices. That spice backpack acts as a reference as well, as does its general appearance. Muscella's name comes from masala, which in Indian cooking means a mixture of spices, and a masala daba, which is a special form of spice rack containing essential Indian herbs and spices. But I put cell in the middle of its name because Muscella is based on the spice merchants and the JRPG stereotype of the traveling merchant. Pulling from other RPGs and JRPGs is something Game Freak does and has done since the beginning, and I love JRPGs, so why not infuse some of that love into these Fakemon? Anyway, Muscella would act much like Gimmighoul throughout your journey in Devar, though it would be a bit more out and about. It has spices to sell after all. Muscella receives great joy from sharing their spices with Pokemon and trainers alike, if they're worthy, so it will always be up for a battle, though you will have to challenge them. Once you defeat or capture one, you will have proven you are worthy of the spices they hold, and you will receive them just like you would Gimmighoul coins. But these spices actually serve a purpose, and it is not to evolve Muscella. You can actually use these spices in your cooking. In Devar, there would be a cooking mechanic, just like curry cooking in Galar, which I was trying to allude to in the first video in this series, but a lot of y'all thought I was simply implying that curry was all Indians eat, which I wasn't. Anyway, it would also act like the sandwich mechanic in Paldea, giving you special boosts in certain areas like encounter rates, titles, and most importantly, shinies. Which Muscella's special spices would act like the Herba Mystica, in that you would use them to get extra special bonuses like boosted shiny odds. In the process, making amazing dishes like Sog Paneer that looks like shiny Tangela, samosas with the appearance of a snow runt, naan with Pikachu's face toasted on it, biryani in the shape of a Pokeball, the list goes on. But speaking of those dishes, we move on to the next kind of gimmick Pokemon I wanted to implement in Devar, a type-changing one. How about a Pokemon to eat all these delicious dishes we're going to make? They're gonna need a big mouth for that, something that can take in a lot of food at once, kind of like the mouth of a whale shark. So let me introduce you to Iridish, the gourmand Pokemon, a pure water type, for now. As I implied, this guy can change its type depending on the kinds of dishes you serve it. If it is a spicy dish, you of course get Iridish Spicy form, which is a water fire type. A sour dish, you get sour form, which is water electric. A bitter dish, the water ice bitter form. A sweet dish, the water grass sweet form. And a salty dish, the water ground salty form. Originally, the salty form was the dry form, but then Paldea came around and replaced dry for salty, so that's why it's ground type rather than rock type. These forms take on the element in full, with different forms of aquatic life being represented in each one. Iridish's typings are also reflected in Muscella's signature move, Spice Rack, which changes type depending on the kind of spice it has in its backpack. Iridish in all of its forms are based on the rainbow fish. No, not that rainbow fish, this one. This enormous fish is found in Hinduism, but also makes reference to Buddha, as some believe him to be an avatar of Vishnu. This fish's rainbow scales each represent an element. The green scales were made of grass, which also represents earth, the yellow scales lightning, the blue scales ice, and the red scales fire. There was a fifth set of scales which represented the ether or sound, thus those scales were invisible, which is represented by Iridish's standard form. This fish was also said to have been as big as a whale, big enough to swallow an unnamed prophet, or in some stories Buddha, whole, which are the reasons behind its eating-based type change, and why I decided to use a whale shark as inspiration, as it is the biggest fish in the ocean currently, and is a fish named after a whale. The astute eye might have also noticed some plane-like elements within its design. These make reference to the Airbus Beluga XL, an enormous transport aircraft used to transport sizable cargo, and also has a large mouth to put this cargo inside of, much like the rainbow fish held the unnamed prophet inside itself, that he was retrieved from 3 days later, which I can only assume was from, natural causes. Iridish's. Iridish's name comes from iridescent, which means showing luminous colors that seem to change when seen from different angles. But there is also a kind of catfish called the iridescent shark, and obviously the second part of its name is just fish. Iridish can be found all over the coasts of Devar as a rare spawn, but do appear more frequently near the coasts of Vizaqua, as it is celebrated by the people who live there. And so, Iridish has a sort of friendship with them. Festivals are held in its honor with different themed foods, which become shared meals between the townspeople and Iridish, which changes Iridish's form and is believed to change the forms of its people, but in a more metaphorical or spiritual sense. Next on the list of gimmicks is Mimics. As I said before, we have Pokemon like Voltorb and Foongus, which are mimics of Pokeballs. But we also got Galarian Stunfisk, which is also partly one. But seeing as the last full-on Pokeball mimic was 4 generations ago, I thought it was high time we got another one. So let me introduce Craball, the ball Pokemon, a pure normal type. As this little dude spends most of his time on land, there's really no need for the water type. Also, we've had a bunch of crabs that aren't water type already, so I thought it would be fun to add to that collection. This little guy is inspired by the smooth box crab, which lives in the Indo-Pacific area of the world's oceans. Once I saw this guy, I knew I needed to make him into a Pokeball mimic. The way it folds up its pincers so it almost looks like a little ball, it was just perfect, as is evident with Craball, who also evolves into Rekapod, the big ball Pokemon. With this evolution, this line's secondary inspiration becomes a bit more evident. This line is also based on a species of crab which actually inspired a yokai, the Heikegani, also known as the samurai crab or the demon-faced crab, which, true to its name, has the appearance of an angry face on its shell, which Rekapod's expression mirrors. Also, this line reflects the general idea of a crab mimicking something else with its shell. The sharp, almost blade-like pincers of Rekapod refer to the samurais for which the Heikegani gets its name. Like I said before, these Pokemon mainly stay on land, though more frequently in big cities where it is easier to hide amongst the more modern objects. Craball are a bit more skittish and are more likely to run away if challenged to a battle, while Rekapod is more than ready to take on the fight, though with their size, they were never looking to hide either. Also, their shinies buck the trend of looking like Great Balls and instead look like Master Balls. But why stop with just one Mimic Pokemon? What about a Mimic that inhabits something other than a Pokeball, like Mimikyu or Gimmighoul? One that you can find hiding and haunting the ruins throughout this region. So I would like you to meet Sinsense, the Incense Pokemon, a Ghost Fire type. Very obviously, this Pokemon is a haunted version of the Incense item found throughout much of the Pokemon series, with it looking most like the Odd Incense. But I imagine there would be multiple colored forms based on the different incense, all remaining Ghost Fire type though. This is a visual representation and was the best I could do with Photoshop. Sinsense's name comes from sin, a transgression against divine law, which ghosts and demons can be seen as, but there is sin twice in its name, doubling down on the fact that this is an evil being. And obviously the second part of its name is incense. India is the world's top producer of incense, with it being deeply rooted in many rituals and forms of worship in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. Thus, in the ruins of ancient forts, cities, or temples, these old incense burners would have been left behind, ripe to be inhabited by the spirits of Pokemon who still have a burning grudge that needs to be extinguished. This Pokemon is also inspired by the legendary incense Hanganko, which has the power to bring forth spirits of the dead when it is burned, which can be seen within the smoke, which leads us to Sinsense's evolution, Jinsense, the Ifrit Pokemon. As its name and classification suggest, this Pokemon is based on the Jinn and Ifrit, both hailing from Islamic culture. With 15% of Indians' population being Muslim, I wanted to make sure to include some Pokemon that made reference to their culture. Jinn are spirits that may inhabit multiple forms, one being fire, and Ifrit are a form of demon, said to be rebellious or evil Jinn, which are formed out of smoke and fire, and are said to also frequently reside in ruins, though some depictions of Ifrit and Afarit are said to be good, or a form of God's wrath. Jinsense takes the form of the more commonly known westernized form of the Jinn, the Genie, appearing as though its old incense burner body is its lamp that it's been released from, which also further mirrors Hanganko, being a spirit coming from the smoke of incense burning. Much like its Ifrit origin, Jinsense are beings of fiery malice, executing revenge upon anyone who dare touches their incense burner body. Both Sinsense and Jinsense can be found popping out from seemingly harmless incense throughout the ruins of Devar, which are inspired by different real-life ruins, such as the Bangar Fort, known as one of the most haunted places in India, which these both represent, and yes, I know the location isn't exactly correct, the royal ruins of Chatteri, the Ellora Caves, and the ruins of Hampi. There would also be some ruins you could find deep in the Rahasha jungle, which hold a mystery that we will explore in the future. And those are some gimmick Pokemon of the Devar region. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.